They say $1 billion can buy you anything, a seat at the most exclusive table in Manhattan, a legacy, even a second chance at life. But what happens when the only person who can save you is the man you've spent your whole career making invisible? This isn't just a story about a life saved, it's about the moment a powerful woman realized her empire was built on a foundation of people she never bothered to see. The mahogany tables at l'Avenue don't just hold crystal, they hold ego. Elena sat at her usual corner table, the kind of spot that signaled power without saying a word. As the CEO of a tech giant that defined the modern hustle, her life was a series of optimized seconds. Tonight, for the first time in years, she had silenced her phone. She wanted to feel the weight of her own success in the silence. 30 feet away, Daniel sat in a world that didn't belong to him. His hands, calloused from 12-hour shifts at the shipping yard, felt heavy against the white linen. This dinner was a victory. He couldn't actually afford a celebration for his daughter's straight-A report card, though she was home with a sitter because the $100 price of entry for two was a bridge too far. He was eating a $40 pasta dish that tasted like the overtime hours he'd pulled to pay for it. In the eyes of the room, Daniel was background noise. He was the help who had accidentally wandered into the inner sanctum. The servers hurried past him to attend to Elena. Elena herself hadn't even glanced his way. To her, people like Daniel were just data points in a labor report. Then, the air left the room. It started with a sharp intake of breath. Elena's hand flew to her throat. The most influential woman in the city was suddenly reduced to a terrified animal. Around her, the winners of the world froze. They shouted for help, they dropped glasses, they looked for someone else to take charge. But Daniel didn't look for permission. He had spent his life managing the quiet emergencies of the working class, the asthma attacks in damp apartments, the flickering lights of a past due bill. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound like a gavel. Rehook, as Daniel lunged toward the woman who had spent a lifetime ignoring people like him, the room went silent. He had the power to let the silence win. But Daniel wasn't looking for revenge yet. He was looking for justice. The crowd parted like a sea of expensive silk as Daniel reached her. "Move," he said. It wasn't a request. It was a command from a man who knew what it felt like when the world tried to suffocate you. He didn't see a CEO. He saw a person running out of time. With a precision born of necessity rather than a manual, he applied the pressure needed to force life back into her. 1 thrust. 2. On the third, the obstruction flew across the polished wood. Elena collapsed into her chair, gasping, her lungs burning with the sudden, violent return of oxygen. The room erupted. People who hadn't moved a finger now clapped as if they were part of the rescue. Elena looked up, her eyes streaming with tears, meeting the tired, steady gaze of the man in the rolled-up sleeves. "Thank you," she choked out. She reached for her purse, her instinct already shifting back to transaction mode. She wanted to pay for the debt. She wanted to tip the hero. But Daniel didn't wait for the check. He didn't offer a name or a business card. He simply picked up his jacket, left the half-eaten pasta he had worked 10 hours to buy, and walked out into the cold New York night. He didn't want her gratitude, and he certainly didn't want her money. He wanted to go home to the daughter who was the only reason he drew breath himself. Rehook, Elena sat in the back of her town car that night, alive but haunted. She had everything, yet a man who had nothing had just handed her the one thing she couldn't buy. And he had walked away as if she wasn't worth the wait. She had to find him, not to reward him, but to find out why he didn't want her reward. It took Elena's high-priced security team 3 days to find him. They expected a hunter, a former medic, or perhaps a disgruntled ex-employee. Instead, they found a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens with a flickering hallway light. When Elena stood at his door, she wore a simple coat, trying to shed the armor of her status. When Daniel opened it, he didn't look impressed. He looked tired. "I told you at the restaurant," she said, her voice wavering in the cramped hallway. "I want to understand." "There's nothing to understand," Daniel replied, leaning against the doorframe. "You were dying." "I wasn't." She stepped inside and saw the quiet revenge of his life. The walls were covered in his daughter's drawings, not stock options. The air smelled of cheap soup, not truffle oil. Everything in the room was a testament to a life lived for someone else. "I can give you a better job," she offered, the words sounding hollow even to her. "I can pay for your daughter's college. Just tell me what you want." Daniel really looked at her, for the first time. "I want you to realize that the people who clean your floors and ship your products are the only reason you get to sit in those restaurants," he said quietly. "We don't want your charity, Elena. We want your respect. We want to not be invisible until you're choking." Elena felt a coldness in her chest that had nothing to do with the winter air. She realized that Daniel's revenge wasn't a move against her life, it was a mirror held up to her soul. And for the first time, she didn't like what she saw. The revenge of Daniel wasn't a headline, it was a revolution in how Elena moved through the world. She didn't write him a $1 million check that would have felt like an insult to his dignity. Instead, she practiced emotional justice. Months later, Daniel's life changed, but not in a way that felt like a handout. He received a call from a recruiter for a logistics firm offering a position with human-centric hours and a pension, a role that valued his years of lived urgency. He didn't know the firm was a subsidiary of Elena's, and he didn't need to. Across the city, the Elena Vance Foundation stopped funding tech incubators and started funding universal CPR training in public schools and emergency stipends for single parents. Elena herself began showing up at her own warehouses, not for a photo op, but to listen to the people who were usually just background noise. But quiet revenge was complete. Daniel had forced a titan of industry to see the world through the eyes of the overlooked. Every year, on the anniversary of that night, Elena receives a small, handwritten note from a girl she's never met. It says, "I'm doing great in school. Thank you for making sure my dad came home that night." And every year, Elena sends one back to an anonymous P.O. box. It contains no money, no promises, just 2 words, "Still breathing." Because sometimes, the greatest act of justice isn't taking what someone has, it's forcing them to see what they've been missing.
Whispers your name. I'm missing you more than the sun misses dawn. Like a bird that forgets the sky it's drawn. Loving you feels like touching the stars. So far away, yet it's close in my scars. The shadows of you in my hallway stand in the creases of notes you wrote by